first one up is Pinewood Nematode disease, pine wilt disease caused by the Pinewood Nematode. Scientific name, not a big deal for you all. Background, a little background. Identified in the U.S. in 1979, found now in 36 states, including Kentucky. Widespread distribution suggests that it's native to the United States. This is one of the few things we get to talk about that's actually here that we export to the rest of the world. Most of the stuff we import and it kills our stuff, but we have exported that to the rest of the world. 27 species of pines, especially damaging to exotic pines. We'll list those later. Just one species of fir and Douglas fir, 2 species of cedar, larch, and spruce. Principally in Kentucky, it's Scots and Austrian pines. Those are the 2 principal non-native pines that we have in Kentucky. And so when you don't have a host and a pathogen together for a long time, they don't get used to one another. Okay, you bring something in from the outside, some exotic pine, and now a pathogen attacks it, it has no defense. And so that's why the exotic pines are the ones being attacked here. Found in wherever these trees are found, mostly in landscapes, windbreaks, Christmas tree farms, forest and recreational plantings. Here we have the nematode. Lots of them. They kind of lay in a characteristic C when you look at them in a dish. That's just for us here. The length, very small, 0.8 of a millimeter. So you can see this thing is pretty darn small. And the distinguishing characteristic up there in the right corner. Okay, a little bit involved, but go through the life cycle here. How does this thing get around? I'm sure most of you think of nematodes, they're in the soil. Well, how does this get into a pine tree? Well, because of longhorn beetles here, and we'll work our way around, but just at this point you have to take my word for it that the beetle carries the nematode into in its body, and then the nematodes feed. If they oviposition, meaning they lay eggs, the females, they usually do that on dying or close to dead trees. But so if we follow this one around, the beetle then lays eggs in slits in the bark. The nematodes enter those slits. Okay, the beetle develops, the nematodes reproduce, they breed in the xylem. Okay, it just gets more and more numbers. They start to clog things up. They also have some toxins involved, and it kills out the cells. So eventually, the water-conducting tissue of the tree is ruined, and that's what makes the tree decline. And then they go into almost like a instant potatoes. I use them. I know, But anyway, instant potatoes, like dry flakes, and you wet them and they come back to life in essence. Well, that's what these nematodes do just about. They almost get to the point where they are almost devoid of moisture. And they will crawl up into the body of a pupating insect here, the longhorn beetle. And I'll show you some pictures later. They fill up all the cavities. And then when the beetle emerges and it goes off to feed, it carries them with them. When it lays eggs in a slit in the bark, the nematodes come out. If it feeds on a healthy tree, okay, these beetles then go to a healthy tree, which part of the life cycle they like to do because they call it maturation feeding. There must be something in the pine that helps their development. Okay, so they move into the wounds that are created from the feeding, and you get this cycle again. If it goes to a resistant host, then the host is able to tolerate the nematode, and they never get to the point where they build up in enough numbers. Okay, so this is the beetle that brings it around. Longhorn beetles, you can tell those are pretty long antennae there. The Pinesora beetle, other beetles in this monogamous genus here. Here is an egg in a pine. Here then the larvae that's feeding, and then you get the pupae. This is at the point where if there are nematodes in this tree, they migrate and fill up the cavities in that insect. And here we are. This is out of scale, but this is just to represent what's going on here. You got both the beetle and the nematode. In the insect, there's what's called trachea. They're just breathing tubes in the insect, and they're hollow. Well, all these little tube things here, those are nematodes. They're packed into that opening in the insect. And so when this insect leaves and goes and feeds, it can deposit a lot of nematodes. They say you could take one of these beetles, the pupae of the beetle, just before it becomes an adult, you stick it in water, and it's just like all these little tiny shimmering things come pouring out of it. Okay, a little ingenious kind of thing there, but that's what goes on. They mostly like the resin canals here in the xylem, and as you can see from this cross section of a slither of wood, the nematodes that are in the xylem, in that resin canal. What do they like to feed on as well? We have, of course, you're all familiar with blue stain fungi. These fungi are brought around by the bark beetles, the little tiny beetles that get in the bark. They're usually the last ones to destroy a tree. And so, but they bring with them this blue stain fungus, and apparently the nematode loves this fungus, and so it feeds on it as well as the components of the tree itself. Just to review, the beetle transmits the pinewood nematode to weak and dying or recently dead pines and fresh logs through egg laying. Takes about 8 to 12 weeks to go from the egg all the way around to where they're going to emerge, about 12 weeks. Okay, so you can see that we're going to have more than one generation of these longhorn beetles, okay, per year. These newly emerged adults fly to healthy pines as well. The maturation feeding. If the pinewood nematode's on those beetles, of course, it comes out and gets into the tree. Now, most of the time, of course, if the tree is a susceptible one, they feed on these cells within the xylem, and they produce the feeding along with toxins disrupts the water transportation within the tree, and then susceptible trees almost always wilt and die as a result of damage. But you also have to have drought stress, okay? Some kind of stress, usually heat and drought, as well as the nematodes, will take the tree out. Just a little time-lapse thing. These are University of Nebraska photos. Here we have a pine tree here. This is week 1, and a little bit of browning here. The tree's beginning to stick out against the background of green, and then here, week 3, already it's wilting and dying. This is in a Scots pine, as it says. Why trees wilt? During warm periods, the nematode spreads throughout the tree and multiplies very rapidly. A generation time, 3 days. 3 days for it to go from one of its little larvae to a female that can produce more eggs. That's the hugely short amount of time to produce lots and lots of nematodes. As they destroy the resin canals, the water moving system clogs up and eventually stops, and then the trees develop this wilt and dead symptom, especially related with drought. You have to have the two things. As I said before, we exported this. This is one of the few things that we have that we exported. Here is a picture in Japan of Japanese red pine just wiping out their forest here. Okay, this is all over Japan, Southeast Asia, and also moved it into Europe as well. This is a picture of the last shipment of pine chips that went to the EU in 1986. They banned all importation of our pines. So there is that is a problem now. We can't sell pine products. That's a definite impact, social, economic impact there. So the sampling extraction here, we take trunks, we take large branches. Usually we like branches a little more than 1/2 inch in diameter. Take a little piece out of that, stick it into a funnel, if you will, anything that will contain water, and then allow about 24 hours for the nematodes to crawl out of that pine piece that you have and into the water, and then you pour off the water and you look for the characteristics of that particular nematode. Okay. You will find other nematodes in there as well, occasionally. Okay. But Also, the nematodes are not uniformly distributed throughout the tree because the beetles didn't land and feed in all the places on the tree. So it's kind of a hit and miss, even though the whole tree eventually succumbs. When they section these things out and look at the populations, it's a random kind of thing. Okay. Management. Dead pines should be removed and burned during winter months as soon as possible. Now, the reason for the winter months is that they say if you disturb them during the year, you'll make the beetles move. And so you're not controlling the beetle anymore because you've scared them off. You've scared them out of the tree. So, but then in the winter time, you'd have to mark these things, and then in the winter come back and do that. You can chip and bury them. Okay, the chipping process would eventually grind up the beetle as well. Okay. Do not keep the wood for firewood. Beetles will continue to emerge from the logs. Okay, so if you're going to cut it down, yeah, I'll burn that, but they keep coming out. So that's why they want you to destroy them as soon as possible. Chemical control is just not practical. And you'd have to go to some expensive injection system, and it would have to go everywhere in great enough concentration to kill out all the nematodes. Perhaps if it was on the White House lawn or something, that might be done, but I don't know of any great studies that say that you can do this with any good rate of success. Plant native pines, of course. Resistant cultivars of the susceptible exotic pines are not available. So between Diplodia tip-light, there's enough fungal disease on Austrian pines and a couple other things on Scotch pines, we pretty well negated using those anyway. Any questions on that part? Yes, ma'am.
So it was first discovered in 79, so it's been an increasing problem since then, right?
Yes.
Is that because of more use of non-native plants, or is the beetle exotic, or are there multiple beetles
Okay.
involved?
The question is why just seeing it in 79 and that kind of thing. Actually, they think, thank you, Terry, they think that, if you'd pass those out, that'd be great, Win. They think that they have a slide from LSU in 1931 that they saved of this nematode. So they know it's been around for a lot longer than that. But as far as the beetles are concerned, there are beetles which are native to here, so because they evolved together. And I think mostly the reason for the increase in the disease is because we planted, especially Austrian pines. That was the landscape architect's magic plant in the 50s and so. And then Scots pines, a little less than that. But that's why we're seeing so many now. We diagnose in the lab maybe 2 or 3 a year, that kind of thing. So it's not a hugely serious problem, but it is something that we run into.
For a sample, you said a 1/2 inch diameter?
Yeah, I like to have a 1/2 inch diameter branch, and then we section it up. And
Since the beetle isn't feeding one area, how do you know where to pull it from?
well, yeah, get a couple of them. We'll take, select maybe 3 or 4 from different places in the tree, and then we'll use pieces from each of those.
The beetle doesn't have a tendency to go at the top or at the bottom.
I think they do tend to feed more at the top and the outer portions of the limbs. Good question. Yes, also.
Does it make a difference if it's a 5-needle pine?
Does it make a difference if it's a 5-needle pine? Well, most of our 5s, white pine and all are native, so they're pretty resistant because they've grown up with the whole beetle and nematode problem.